So finally, maybe we'll get to hyperstructures, and a good starting point might be just what's your interpretation of what it is? What's a good way to understand what a hyperstructure is? And then maybe we can get into like what their purpose is and some examples.
Okay, so the problem that a hyperstructure is trying to solve is trying to find a stable way to fund public goods. And in particular, it's trying to find a stable way to fund protocols. Things that are pointed to as classic examples of hyperstructures are Zora, which is where this came from. This came from Jacob, who is the founder of Zora. It came from, it's said about Uniswap. It's said about maybe Bitcoin. And the key idea is that it's kind of like this self-hosted system, maybe. It is able to fund itself as a result of kind of like its internal dynamics. And one of the things that allows it to have this like long-term survivability is that it's this immutable protocol that exists on top of some sort of system that's going to last for a really long time. One of the things I guess, like, I'm not sure what the etymology of the term is. I don't know why it's hyper, but yeah. So that's the key idea. Hey, Jacob, let me pull up the article. Jacob has like a set of criteria that he thinks are really important.
You think of like hyperspace is to space, what hyperstructures are to structures, you know? It's kind of almost like metaverse has just been destroyed as a phrase, but this layer on top, right? We have physical structures, then we have hyperstructures. Still, I'm not sure on the etymology, but
this would make sense. This would make sense. I'm noticing that hyper is becoming like the new prefix, the like prefix de jour. I don't know exactly. Yeah,
you need to get metahyper.com ASAP.
Everyone is so hyper, and that's the one thing that I need less of in my life. So the properties that he points towards are unstoppable. These structures are unstoppable. They're free to use. They're valuable to use. They are expansive, which means that they have built-in incentives for participants. They're permissionless, so they're universally accessible and resistant to censorship. They're positive sum, so they create win-win games, and they're credibly neutral, so they don't distinguish between different players. And all in all, I think that this is a beautiful concept. And so the reason that I took issue with it is because I thought that the concept had some dissonance. It had some internally incoherent components, and in particular, I think that it's not possible for it to simultaneously be free and valuable. And I think that it just violates the no free lunch theorem, right? It's as if you're creating perpetual motion machines. So there's like a lot of ways to like work into this. And one of the problems is that there's a notion of the hyperstructure in the abstract, and then there's some like specific ideas about the mechanisms that underpin and enable that particular property. And I don't think it's worth going into the game theory there, although I've spent like very many hours trying to go into the game theory and think through it. And so I can also link to you, if it's interesting, a recording where I try and like actually work through the game theory, like line by line, essentially, and see. I mean, it makes sense where, like, why this was that seemed plausible, but but long story short, I think that I feel really confident saying that it cannot be free to use while also simultaneously being valuable. And I think that should make intuitive sense. I think that if it sounds like magic, it probably is magic. And that, of course, it is the case that if you want something to be valuable, then it's valuable because if it's valuable to own, then it's valuable to own because somebody is paying for it.